Hey friends, this is Jenny with Paper Cardinal, and I am super excited to share this video that is for the Spring Fling Scrapbook.com affiliate Instagram hop. I am doing the hop, but I also decided to make a video of the card I'm going to create. So real quick, I'm just going to use, my main focus is to use this gorgeous Pinkfresh Studio die that's real intricate and lacy. It's got these fun flowers and it says hello. I'm going to use my new Picket Fence life-changing brushes, which I gotta say, they are pretty life-changing. I'm going to use several Distress Oxide inks with those brushes. I'm going to, my main card base and the part I'm going to die cut is going to be out of the Craft Perfect Pearlescent card. And I'm going to end up using the Craft Perfect Classic card in Pistachio Green as a base for the card base, which is there. That's the piece of Neenah that I'm going to do my ink blending on. And these are some Nuvo confetti that I might use for the shaker part of the card I'm going to make. And I had this idea to use to take the letters that are part of this die and use some heat embossing on the bottom half of it, which you'll see what happens when I do that. So I'm going to go ahead and start here. I die cut most of this off screen using my Gemini Junior. And what I wanted to do for the base here is I'm just going to line up, I'm going to trace out my 5x7 card base, and then I'm going to, I left it a little bit bigger so I could hold it on the sides and have a place to hold my hand so I wouldn't get it messed up with the Distress Oxides. I'm going to use Spun Sugar, Picked Raspberry, and Twisted Citron, and I am going to use these life-changing brushes that I was very skeptical about. I really like my big stencil blending brushes for light blending, and I just use my foam applicators mostly from Holtz, and Nuvo has some new ones, and I just didn't know if I really needed these, and everybody talks about how they just look just like their makeup brushes, and but I do really like the way you can, hold it really close. I don't know actually how you would hold it without holding it really close. At least I feel like I would need that for control. They may feel different with just traditional Distress ink or other ink pads, but with the Oxides are so easy to blend, this worked really great, and they're pretty fun. I'm not quite sure how you clean them. I just ended up just rubbing them off on another piece of scratch paper until most of the ink came out, and I figured I would just use one for each sort of color family. I only bought the smaller pack of 4 that I think are sort of the bigger ones, but I have heard that the smaller ones come in really handy too. So I just kind of did some blending here, kind of in sort of patches. I thought about doing something more detailed to go in coordination with the die as far as where the flowers were and the leaves were, and that took me down a whole other path that I just didn't want to get into. So I just decided to make this kind of splotchy, and you're gonna get enough of it to see through with the colors, but not too much to be able to tell whether it's the leaf or the flower or whatever. And Distress Oxides are great because they do really overlap. They don't blend in as much, so I could go back with the Spun Sugar and lighten up a lot of that on top. So I just want to make sure that's really good and dry before I do anything else with it. So I'm going to trim off the pieces that I left larger for me to be able to have a place to put my figures. And then I end up, I think, going back and trimming it again and again because I wanted to make it a little bit smaller to have a little bit of a white border from the card base. Okay, so that's the piece. You can see, here's my card base. I'm going to score and fold, and it is a 5x7 card, and it's going to be a top folding card because it's horizontal or landscape. And then that is the piece of the Pearlescent card that I cut off screen with the die sort of in the middle, and then that's what the die looks like when it comes out. And this sort of came about because I had watched a video that Jennifer McGuire did just the other day where she used this sort of technique to do kind of bigger dies, and it was like a stamped image, but she used the outline die to create a shaker over the stamped image. And then, so that's kind of where this came from. This is a little bit different because I'm going to sort of piece these letters back into it. But I thought this would be a really neat way to do it, and I loved the idea of doing, I just love this die, and I had to use it somehow. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut out the same die out of Fun Foam and use that to pop up the shaker. And I did it twice so that I could glue those together and then glue that to the front of, I wanted it to be pretty dense. And one of the layers of the foam that are from the letters, I use those to pop up the letters a little bit, but not to the point where they'll hit the acetate, if that makes any sense. So I'm going to just take I'm going to take Glossy Accents, and I think I'm going to put the acetate on first on this piece. I can't remember quite which order I do it in. I had to make sure my yeah, that's what I'm going to do. I had to make sure my hands were really clean because I've noticed just touching the acetate, I really need to keep it on the side, keep my fingers on the side because of, just static, and this room is full of static, and I tried heat embossing on top of the acetate one time, and my fingers just ruined everything. So I'm trying to keep it really careful, and I've got this heat resistant acetate I bought. It's a pad of it, and it comes with sort of tissue paper in between, and so I try to hold on to the tissue paper as much as I can to keep it clean and free of any fingerprints and gluey, sticky fingers that I inevitably have. And so I trim that down a little bit, and then I'm going to trim down the bottom too, so I can mount all of that onto that piece of pistachio green cardstock, and then that will be mounted onto the card base. So I'll have like a white border, and then the green, and then this piece here. So I put that off to the side, and this is where I'm going to put the acetate onto it. And so that's the piece of tissue paper there you see. And I'm going to use Glossy Accents to make sure that it stays on there really good. And I'm usually a pretty rushed crafter, and so I make a lot of mistakes. And because I was really careful this time, it took a little bit longer, but I didn't really make any mistakes. I kind of did everything, and it all kind of went smoothly, which is pretty shocking because that normally doesn't happen for me. And one of the things that I usually end up doing is using too much glue and too close to the edge and squishing it around. So this time I made sure I put it around, with a good spacing around the outside of this whole detailed area. And I used my little tissue paper there to rub the top of it and make sure it's all squished down without me touching anything. And it worked really good. So I'm going to set that off to the side to dry. And I actually didn't have any squishy bits come out. And this is going to be my card base. Well, not the card base. It's going to be the base on top of the card base. And I cut it down to a little bit smaller than 5x7. And then this is even smaller than that. I think it's maybe a 1/2 inch smaller. So it's 1/4 inch all the way around on both in sets, like sort of, 1/2 inch smaller with the with this cardstock, and then 1/2 inch smaller with the ink blended piece. All right, so I did have a little screw up here. I did end up getting my my base a little bit off of the bottom there, and that's okay. You know what? I actually think that I don't end up having a white border. I think I ended up thinking I was going to get too close to the edge and I wouldn't have enough, but I think I had planned to. So, okay, so that never mind, that green bit is actually the 5x7 piece. So there's my card base there. And then I'm going to adhere my blended piece on top of it there and press it down. And then I'm going to get my piece that's this pearlescent piece, and I'm going to try to kind of figure out exactly where the lacy piece is going to sit underneath it. And it takes me a while to kind of figure that out because I got to figure out a way to mark it without getting too much stuff in the way. So that's the foam piece there, and I think I go ahead and decide to adhere the foam. And I made sure to, again, do it outside of it, but I used the Deluxe adhesive from Nuvo and adhere that foam piece. And it worked pretty good. Because the fun foam is kind of stretchy, it does tend to kind of warp a bit, and you got to make sure you get it in the right place with all of those little bits and pieces. And that's a good reason to use the adhesive, the liquid adhesive, because it kind of gives you that plenty of time to kind of move that around. And after each time I glued something, I put it aside and put some stamp blocks and something heavy on top of it to let it get really good and dry and flat as possible. So I'm just going to trim up a little tiny piece of foam here to level that up on that one side there. And then I'm going to start to put it all together. So what I'm going to do is figure out where the inset piece, the lacy piece with the flowers and everything, is going to go, and that will be glued down to the ink blended piece. And then I'm going to work on the letters, and as I said, I had 2 layers of foam that'll be part of the shaker part, and then I'm going to use 1 layer of the foam to adhere the letters to, and these are the letters that are out of the pearlescent card that came out from the original cut. So I took everything that I used from the original cut except for the little, pieces of the flowers or whatever, and those I'm going to use again. And I decided to get smart here and I just took a piece of scratch paper and put some purple tape on it, and I'm going to adhere, or I'm just going to temporarily stick the my letters on there so that then I can kind of dip them or, tap them into the Versamark ink or clear mark ink. And then I will be able to have a place to hold onto them while I emboss them and heat set them, and then be able to take them off without having too much of a problem. So I'm just using the edge of that stamp pad there and the edge of my finger, and I'm just sort of going over about half of the letters. And I'm going to use this Fine Detail Gold embossing powder from Nuvo. Right, so I'm going to dump that back in there, and then I'm going to use my heat tool, get it good and hot, and then heat that up. And I just thought that would be kind of a neat way to bring in a little bit of metallic detail and make it pop a little bit and still not be too much. I ended up trying to put a second layer on top of it just to make it a little bit thicker. So anyway, that's kind of where that went from. I didn't want to put too much gold or get too busy with anything. I wanted it to be pretty subtle and just have these nice sort of pinks and greens and spring colors. And but I did, I needed to have a little bit of bling on there, so that's where that idea came from. So I'm going to glue those letters onto the face of the foam, and then I will put these letters in the place where back into, inset them back into where they came out from the original die cut. There's actually a set of thickers that are maybe Dear Lizzie or crepe paper from a couple years ago that were sort of half and half gold and white, and I really love those. So this would be a good way to kind of recreate that. And I was kind of worried about the whether or not my confetti will get too caught up in the letters, and then in a lot of the, you know, intricate pieces of this lacy kind of die cut. But I decided to use some spray adhesive to really make sure that every bit of that was stuck down as much as possible. There were no, like, you know, ways that any kind of anything would get underneath it. And that's probably the best way to use that for something like this, you know, where it's so detailed. Okay, so I'm going to use my powder tool here to kind of just get rid of some of that static around the edges of it. And now I'm going to kind of try to figure out how to place that inside so I can mark where it's going to be and then glue that to the outside. If I was smart, I probably would have done that onto the blended piece before I put the blended piece onto the card base. That way I could have cut some of that down. It ended up being fine. It's just a teeny hair off level to me, and you could probably see it from the pictures, but it's like the hello is not exactly horizontally in line with the rest of the card, which bothers me, but I'm a little OCD like that. So this is where I'm off screen now using some this Scotch Super 77 spray adhesive, and so once I kind of figured that out, I barely just touched it there and made sure that's kind of where it was going to end up. And then I am going to put another piece of tissue paper on top of it and really push down and burnish that in with my fingers as much as possible. And you know, I used to use spray adhesive a lot, but it can get really messy and it can get really noxious. And my craft room is in our basement, and there's a window, but it's small and it's inoperable, and to get out of the room would just be kind of a pain. So anyway, I don't really use it that much anymore, but okay. I set the inside of the O back inside that so you can see where that came from. And now I'm going to set all of these with glossy accents to make sure that nothing moves. And so those will be the one layer, and then there'll be, like, you know, just a little bit of space in between that and then the top of the acetate where the top of the card will be. All right, so I'm going to hold that down, make sure it's good and in place. I had actually done a sort of a mock-up where I did come back and paint. I did come back and paint under each of those rose, sort of, you know, little rose flowers and all of the leaves, and paper piece them inside. And I got to about maybe a quarter of the way through that, and I decided that it would possibly take me all day to paper piece all those teeny pieces back in there. And yeah, so that would be an aspiring project, but I just don't think I don't think that's going to happen. So this is pretty much it. I'm going to use my little confetti here, and I use two kinds. I didn't use that much because I didn't want to take away too much of it, but I used these ice white circles that are Nuvo, and they're from a set called, I think it's called the Golden Years, and it's got like gold, rose gold, silver, and this white, which is really cool, and they're just flat little circles. And then the other one is a new one that's part of the Dream in Color trend, and it's the Rainbow Quartz Triangles. And so I just use a little bit of that. I didn't want to overpower it too much and take away too much from the color and the hello and everything. And those little rainbow triangles they're iridescent, and they're so cool because they really reflect the light off of everything around it. So it makes, you know, it kind of takes on the color of the pink or the gold or the green. And that is it. You can see these are the close-ups and then the final card. I'm super excited at the way it turned out and so happy to be a part of this Instagram hop. Make sure that you check out the links below for all the products, and check out scrapbook.com for all of their spring products and new products. And make sure you go to the rest of the people on Long the Hop. This is a group of super talented ladies that I'm very excited to be a part of. And I will be back with another video soon. Thanks so much for watching. Bye.